Hey everyone, welcome back to The Gap. Now, the episode we have today, it's targeted to specifically the students and the younger immigrants who are coming into Australia. One thing that all immigrants know, especially students, is that getting into the work market in any new country is one of the biggest hurdles you are ever going to face. I faced it, and countless others like me from all over the world who have moved to Australia or Canada or the US or any other country in the world would find that holds true. One of the reasons is the unawareness of how the job market is like within that particular country. Another thing is not knowing the proper etiquette of how to approach interviews or job applications. Another really big factor is the language barrier for people like myself or from any other non-English native country. The language barrier is something that is really true, and unfortunately it is one of the things that gives the biggest first impressions of yourself to potential employers. So it's just something that I wanted to touch upon. I feel that this is an area where some guidance is really required, especially for people who are coming into Australia, and it can be really beneficial to talk to somebody who is within that realm and knows exactly how to properly approach job applications and job interviews. So for that reason, my guest today is Sudarshan Suresh. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Hussein. I'm absolutely thrilled to be here.
Yeah.
I think it's really inspiring what you're doing, and I really admire it. I feel like there's so much value in listening to people's stories, and it opens up new possibilities, and it can be really inspiring. So, really thrilled to be here.
Thank you so much for joining us. And value, as you said, is the main motive here, that we try to provide value in a way that's also engaging.
Yeah.
Listening to people's stories. I mean, I love to hear how people came to the point that they are. So we're going to follow through with that as well. Just before we get into the conversation, I'd ask all of our listeners to please take a second out of your time and hit that subscribe button. Also, you can see here we have all of our social media presence in all of the platforms where we upload our short form content. So if you guys like the content, if you guys like the podcast, hit the subscribe button, share it with your friends and family, share it with people who you think might get value out of this. And let's move forward with the talk itself. So Sudarshan, just to tell the people a brief profile of who you are and what you do. Sudarshan works at Westpac Bank as an Internal Audit Manager, but apart from his day job, he also works on his own venture, his own business, where he helps young immigrants and young job seekers land their dream job. His initiative is called Transform to Thrive. I believe it has immense value for young graduates, for young people, for young job seekers who are coming into the market. So we'll try to get some insights from Sudarshan himself on how he believes is the best way for immigrants to approach job applications and interviews. All right. Sudarshan, so basically the first thing that I always try to find out is where a person is coming from, their backstory, because that gives us a lot of context in understanding who the person is. And I find that people really find it really relatable as well, and inspiring at the same time. So just take us back to like your early days up to your graduation and, before coming into Australia. Who was Sudarshan Suresh up to that point?
All right. Well, about 10 years ago, I was studying BCom at Jain University in Bangalore. And it's a pretty funny story how I got there, actually, because I had studied science. I was preparing for the IIT exams.
Okay.
And I finished the exams. I got a good seat in a college. I'd signed up for it. And then one day I remember my dad woke me up and he said, "Come, we're going." And I was like, "Where are we going?" He said, "Just come, get ready and let's go." So I followed him along. And next thing I knew, he was taking me to like a few BCom colleges,
Okay.
Which had an affiliation with the Chartered Accountancy program.
Okay.
And the next thing I knew, I was signed up for a BCom and a CA program. I had no idea what I was getting into. And for a bit of context, I come from a family of chartered accountants. Both my parents are CAs, and commerce runs in their blood, right? So I guess that really launched me into a path which I didn't really know what I was signing up for. But I guess it seemed more fun than science, to be honest. So I rolled with it and went along.
That's what I was about to ask. That what do your parents do? Because for a parent in India to take their son away from the IIT exam, and get them registered for BCom, that's very rare.
It is.
Okay, interesting. So you're from a family of accountants.
That's right. Yes.
So your mind works majorly in mathematical terms, you'd say.
Well, you can say I grew up around that environment where my mom was the CEO of a bank and my dad used to conduct bank audits. So always a lot of talk around the dinner table around accounting, banking. So I just kind of grew up in that environment. So I would say that comes naturally to me.
Okay, nice. And like you completed your CA in India.
That's right. Yes.
And what year was this?
So I finished in 2015. I had a deal with my dad back then.
Okay.
Because I remember really struggling to finish it at one point. I was really struggling to find the motivation because for the final exam,
Yep.
at one point I actually stacked up all the books. Look, I'm not a very tall guy,
Okay.
but I actually stacked up all the books that I
Yeah.
needed to memorize and study. It was taller than me.
Right.
Right. So I was really daunted, like looking at it.
Yeah.
And I really needed to find the motivation to get through it. And at that point in time, I also fell in love with like traveling.
Yep.
So I made a deal with my dad. I said, look, I'm going to finish this course for you.
Yeah.
After that, I'm going to do whatever I want. Right.
Okay.
And he said, look, we have a deal. And that kind of really gave me the motivation to like get into like a cave for 4 months and just study for like 10 hours every day.
Yep.
And I finished that in my first attempt. And so that was in 2015.
Okay. And okay, so that deal with your dad that you made, is that how you ended up coming to Australia then?
It's indirectly related, I think. So what it led to me doing was since I was so passionate about travel, I actually joined a group of adventure travelers.
Okay.
It was called Nirvana Nomads. So
Okay.
they basically got a bunch of strangers together every weekend or for a week-long trek, and we would lead expeditions all over the country. So a lot
Wow.
of trekking expeditions, cultural immersions, surfing adventures. So
Amazing.
I was leading these expeditions. So every weekend I would meet a bunch of new people, and my job was to make sure they had the best time of their lives.
Nice one.
And went back home with some really great memories. And then I would go back and write about these stories, the little moments that took place where people connected and became friends in like 48 hours.
Yeah.
And just come back and share that with the rest of the world. So that got me into writing.
So that got you. I saw that on your LinkedIn profile that you have. Sudarshan here has a master's in writing. Actually,
That's
he has a
right, yeah.
postgrad in writing. So going from IIT preparation with your basic education in science to doing the CA to then doing adventure traveling all over India and then going for a master's in writing of all things.
Right.
I mean that you just explored every little facet of what life could offer in terms of knowledge and stuff.
I was very curious and explorative. I would say that's one of the things that drove me back in my 20s, like early 20s. I had this thirst to explore new fields, new places, meet new people, have new experiences.
Interesting.
So that was like my primary driving factor. So
Do you always feel that you had growing up in a family, in a household that was mostly rigid around accountancy and stuff, do you always feel you had a creative side of you that you always wanted to explore?
that's a great question.
Because nobody gets into writing, and I know for a fact that your thesis was on fiction writing.
That's right, yeah.
Right, you wrote he wrote a 15,000 word work that was based on fiction.
That's right, yeah.
Right.
It was a speculative fiction story.
Yep.
Well, I do think that creativity was sparked when I was writing for Nirvana Nomads, because I was writing the monthly emails and the social media content.
Yeah.
And I had a couple of really close friends as well who were really into writing. I've also been like reflecting and journaling for a very long time in my life. So writing has been an integral part of my daily life since I was like 17.
Interesting.
And that was something I wanted to explore. I remember after my CA, I took a solo trip across Europe. And there was this one moment when I was in the Colosseum in Rome, and I was just filled with this sense that, okay, there's a whole new adventure ahead of me. And I wanted to actually study something that I was passionate about, because I finished CA. I guess that gave me a bit of a greater risk tolerance to go and take a risk about something else, because I had a safety net. So I wanted to go and study writing, and that's really what brought me to Australia.
Okay. How does that connection work?
So I found that Melbourne University had a master's program in creative writing, editing, and publishing. And that was literally the only place I applied to. Nowhere else. Just applied for that one role because I knew that's what I wanted. I went all in.
Not bad. You need to go all in on.
Yeah, you have to go all in, right? No backup plans. I just went all in on that front.
Okay.
And I was lucky enough to be accepted into that master's program. And that's what saw me flying halfway across the world to the land down
So
under.
you initially came to Melbourne.
That's right, yeah.
Obviously.
I spent about 5 years in Melbourne.
How did you why make the move to Sydney then?
That was mostly work related. I was working with PwC Sydney, but remotely from Melbourne. And it's a whole story how I got to PwC Sydney. But they wanted me to move to Sydney as well.
Okay. And while you were doing your master's in writing, like you were already working with PwC at that time?
No, I was actually working with a travel company based out of Melbourne.
Okay.
So I was helping people like Australians, like explore India. So I would make tour packages for them,
right.
luxury and at all levels for them to explore the length and breadth of India. And that was something I was really passionate about as well because it's a beautiful
with your
country.
background.
Yeah. It's a beautiful country, and I could see that Italy had an impact on people's lives because they would come back and give us these amazing reviews about how their life and their perspective had changed.
One thing I love about the subcontinent as a whole, all of these countries combined, is that you travel the length and breadth of any of these countries. There's such a diverse range of landscapes. You go to any one of these countries, you can find from mountains to deserts to rainforests to arid areas to beaches. Everything's available right there.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. I also think that each state in India, for example, has such a diverse culture, cuisine, language, right? So it's such an immersive and rich experience for people when they travel abroad and they come back slightly different.
Yeah, for sure. 1960s, the hippie trail that trailed all the way across India and Pakistan, all the way up to the Afghan border. The legends of that stuff.
Yeah, I think in that sense, Australians love to travel as well, and they love to absorb culture, which is something really amazing about them. So yeah, I was glad to be doing that along with my masters.
Okay, right. So now, what year is this that you are in Sydney with PwC?
So I moved to Sydney in 2021.
Okay.
So from 2016 to 2021, I was in Melbourne.
Oh, you went through the worst part of COVID in Melbourne, mate.
That is a whole chapter of my life that I can look back on now and like maybe smile about. But at the time, it
would have been hell, wouldn't it?
It was really tough, mate. I gotta say, like, imagine I've graduated from my master's and I'm looking for roles.
Yeah.
This was back in 2019, end of 2019. And I was really, like, I'd completed my CPA as well at the time. And I was looking for accountancy-related roles.
Yes.
And I had, like, about 20 interviews. And I was really, like, building a sense of momentum. And around Feb 2020, right? I was continuing to work with my travel company. And I was getting these interviews, building momentum. And then COVID hit. Right. There's a hiring freeze. 1 month later, I'm let go from my job because international borders are closed.
Right.
And my boss was a great guy. I had a lovely rapport with him.
But it's just business.
It's business, right? The government was subsidizing people who were Australian nationals with the job seeker program. But unfortunately, that didn't extend to migrants. So he had no option but to let me go. So a month in April 2020, I was at a point where I had about $6,000 in my bank account. And I was staring at a really tough decision. Do I stay or do I go back home? Because I don't have enough money to cover rent for more than a few months. And I knew I wanted to crack it here, but the circumstances were really difficult, right? Because no company is really hiring. And it was quite tough. We were staring into a cold, bleak winter around May. And I guess that was the one point where I was starting to lose a sense of hope.
Yep.
And I had to really kind of dig in and find a sense of resilience to overcome that.
Yeah, I went through a very similar situation when COVID hit. So I had also very recently graduated. I graduated from my master's in 2019 December, and March 2020 is when COVID hit and the border started closing, right? And that was actually when I had started looking for jobs and applying because I'd just gotten done with my master's. So that was a really tough time. No job seeker allowance for obviously international students and stuff. No compensation from the government, unfortunately. Really difficult finding jobs because there's very little openings. There's a hiring freeze. On top of which, if you try to do the odd jobs that you usually do, like if you used to drive an Uber or do Uber Eats and everything, suddenly because of COVID, people are not really using Uber Eats anymore, right? So there was a lot of those were bleak times, as you said. On top of the fact, I had my missus here with me. We had a baby on the way as well.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So,
oh, my God. I can't imagine the pressure.
Yeah. That was a whole other experience, taking like being pregnant and going for those regular doctor checkups and those scans in the midst of COVID and all that. That was like that an added layer of pressure on top of everything else.
Oh, my God.
Yeah. But we managed to get through that. Now that I think back, most of COVID seems like a blur, doesn't it?
I think we're all just happy to forget it.
I think so. Collectively, we all just want to check that memory away. Yeah, 2020, 2021 did not happen.
Yeah, I think we can just write off those years.
Write off those years. Absolutely. Right. So,
but that said, I would actually look back at those times as pretty transformative for me.
True.
Because it forced me to like confront the worst case scenario, but also really find my true sources of motivation and where I get my source of confidence from, and really put myself out there. So I've learned so much as well from that experience, which I feel is relevant to the day.
Yeah, it teaches you a lot about your own self. And I guess that is how human beings intrinsically are, that, you once you've been something as bad as COVID and the lockdowns and everything, you kind of become more resilient. Like you said, the resilience is what divides the people who stayed and the people who unfortunately had to leave. And unfortunately, a lot of people had to leave. Personally, I know so many people who could not make it. It didn't make sense for them to stay.
My housemate at the time, really close friend as well, he had to go back because they were starting to take a mental health toll on him. Like you're just stuck in a room, you have a 5-kilometer radius you can't get out of.
Yep.
And you don't getting a job after graduating, it can really take a toll.
Yeah,
So-
plus living expenses.
Exactly. It's still expensive, right? So yeah, I guess that's one of the things that made me really passionate about wanting to help people,
Yep.
and help them thrive and get unstuck. Yeah.
Okay, so tell me more about your experience at PwC. What were you doing? Were you an auditor there?
Yes. So just before I dive into that, a quick link to how I got the role at PwC,
Yep,
right?
sure.
So May 2020 was COVID, and I had been volunteering with this organization called Initiators of Change at the time, and that's when I really felt the value of having a social capital that you build in Australia. Because what that allowed me to do was, because I was really desperate at the time, I reached out to one of the directors with whom I had a rapport. I said, look, I want to work with you guys. And by then I'd already demonstrated my value by being part of the strategy committee.
Sure.
And she really got behind my corner and supported me. And in a few days, they had a board meeting, and then they came back to me with a customized, tailored role. It was a short-term contract, but a custom role for someone just based on my background and skill sets. Honestly, that felt like a miracle to me at the time.
Okay.
What I was charged with doing was to kind of lead a whole membership base of this organization through a digital transformation
Yep.
during one of the toughest times, May and June 2020, which was really tough in Melbourne. And being part of that and actually taking the focus away from myself and starting to contribute, what that let me do is it allowed me to shift to a position of strength. Because now I'm focused on giving back and doing my best for someone else. And this was the time when I got the opportunity to interview for PwC as well.
Okay.
And I guess having that position of strength in my mindset, it allowed me to approach that interview with PwC as well with a lot more confidence, which was so critical to me getting that role in the first place. So yeah, I guess that's what really kickstarted it, because I was doing really well in my project manager role at Initiatives of Change, and that confidence kind of flowed into that interview, and the interviewers were very happy to have me on board. Yeah.
That's one thing that I feel a lot of people who are coming from immigrant backgrounds, particularly people coming from the subcontinent, they don't put that much value on having a width and breadth of experience in their lives. They're normally, due to circumstances or whatever reason, people have like a very straight path that they have been following from their early age up to when they start looking for jobs. But for a person like yourself who has had those kind of experiences of traveling and promoting travel, and with Initiators of Change, stuff like that, working with communities, that instills in you a huge variety of experiences of dealing with different kinds of people, dealing with different kind of situations, becoming more of like a problem solver in a general sense, which I believe is much more important for companies in this day and age, rather than being a specialist in any one particular field. Plus, it also helps you a great deal in your interviews if you have a lot of stuff other than the job to talk about.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
I
because
couldn't agree more.
because the companies, even if you look at some of the top companies back in India or Pakistan or South Asian countries, they normally go for, once you have applicants who are all on the same level in terms of education and experience, right? How do you differentiate them? You differentiate them based on what their personal experiences are like. A person who is a genuine problem solver in their day-to-day life is going to be more valuable for a company than somebody who's just a specialist in a particular field.
I couldn't agree more. I think you made some really amazing points there. Like, companies hire problem solvers. They're hiring because they have a problem, and they're filling a role to fix that problem. That itself is a massive mindset shift. The other aspect to it is that people with like a well-rounded background tend to bring a lot more of their selves at work. And I guess people from Southeast Asian countries, we have this set blueprint for us as we grow up, right? Like do well in 10th grade, do well in 12th grade, get into a good university, get a good well-paying job, get married, have kids. That's the set path that's laid out for us by our parents and by society. I guess traversing outside of that set path allows you to collect more experiences,
Yes.
which shape you into a more well-rounded person,
Yeah.
which companies really value.
Yes, correct. And even on a personal level, I feel it's very enriching. Like, I feel I've learned so much more about myself with the little amount of traveling that I've done, whatever little you can manage or afford. But it really opens you up. Different experiences and different adverse experiences open you up to a lot more ideas and ways of looking at things that you previously would not have done in your life.
Absolutely.
Right. Okay, so you're at PwC at that point. Tell me more about initiators of change. I find that very interesting. So you were talking about digital transformation, and during COVID, I just realized that would have been such a huge factor in businesses being able to survive or businesses running into the ground. Whoever was able to effectively and very quickly align themselves with the digital transformation would have been the businesses that actually survived and thrived.
Absolutely. Look, Initiatives of Change is a global organization. It started as a movement back in the 1940s when the founder was looking to prevent World War II.
Okay.
Eventually, that didn't happen. So he was instrumental in repairing relationships between France and Germany after the war.
Okay.
And that was based upon his personal ethos, which was something called listening to your inner voice. So he prioritized taking 20 minutes every day just to connect with his own conscience and look at whether he's leading his life based on certain values.
Okay.
And that kind of ballooned into a movement because the moment people started applying that way of approaching life, instead of people judging and criticizing each other, they took responsibility for their own lapses in their behavior. And that just completely transformed individual relationships, family relationships, societal ones, and organizational and country relationships. So that spread all over the world. I actually got involved with them back in India. And like I mentioned, since 17, I've been reflecting and writing on a daily basis. And here in Australia, they do a lot of work around building trust. That's one of their core purpose and values. And so here in Australia, they work with like indigenous communities and First Nations people and repairing the relationships with them. At that time, back in 2020, we have an aging demographic in terms of a membership. So people aren't very familiar with Zoom. A lot of our programs were conducted via like in-person gatherings. So we had to very rapidly adapt to conducting them in a Zoom environment.
Right.
And I was willing to quickly get on board with that and help facilitate a series of events, which really brought people together, fostered a sense of community and hope at a time when it was really dark outside. That really catalyzed the transformation of that organization and brought people together in a really kind of meaningful way. Ultimately led to me being voted in as a director within the organization. And I still continue to volunteer with them.
Okay.
It's something very close to my heart.
No, I think that's very commendable. I think it's something. Look, anybody who volunteers their time and effort for any kind of change on any level, I think that's very commendable. Okay, so you're at PwC at this point. You're working there with the audits team. Where does Transform to Thrive or the idea for Transform to Thrive come into your mind?
Right. So I was working with PwC for about 2.5 years. And I was working within audit. I guess I'd worked with PwC back in India as well for 3 years. And that's what allowed me to get in here as well.
Sure.
And I had a lot of learning through that time. It's a very steep learning curve because I was getting back into accounting and audit after 5 years away when I was out traveling and exploring during my 20s. And I had to really quickly adapt to this really competitive, high-performing culture. And I learned a lot along the way there in terms of the rules of the game, as I like to call them, in terms of what it takes to perform at a really high level and how you approach stakeholders, build relationships, communicate and present and position yourself as a top performer. And I guess all of those learnings kind of inform my approach towards my coaching now after I started Transform to Thrive. So to answer your question about how Transform to Thrive came about, it was actually after I joined Westpac.
Okay.
It just started a few months ago. I I've been in Westpac for nearly 10 months now. And one of the most amazing things about working at Westpac is that I have better work-life balance,
Yep.
which gives me more time to pursue other creative endeavors,
Yep.
which is where this really started.
Okay. And you did identify a genuine gap in the market that, yes, there are a lot of young immigrants coming into the country, particularly immigrants from non-English speaking backgrounds who are coming from countries that are either overpopulated or there's a scarcity of resources. And in that environment, you don't really have a lot of well-rounded individuals being produced, right? I mean, I'm testament to that. You're testament to that. But what you identified was the need to help such people who are otherwise technically brilliant, who are very good at what they do. They just need to have the confidence and the ability to get past the threshold of the HR to be able to get into a company that, that actually allows them and their skills to shine through.
Absolutely.
What kind of work do you do with Transform to Thrive? Like how do you, once, suppose I'm somebody who comes up to you that, Sudarshan, I'm an engineering graduate. I have a little bit of experience from back home. I'm not that confident in interviewing. I'm not that confident with presenting myself, but I'm really hardworking. What can I do to actually land a better job or land my first job in Australia, which is a very, very huge hurdle to get past?
It is. And you really hit the nail on the head there, because let's just back up here for a second, right?
Yeah.
So let's say you're making a decision to come abroad and study in Australia.
Yes.
One of the factors that's playing in your mind is the fact that you have 2 years of a visa that's granted to you after you graduate, where you hope to somewhat recover the costs of your education. Now, what no one tells you is that it's really tough to break into an industry in Australia without relevant local work experience. And that is a huge barrier, because you could apply to so many roles, but no one really tells you that you need that relevant local work experience to find that job, keeping even visa considerations aside, right? So I guess if someone like that were to approach me, I would work with them on an individual basis. Number one, to find that point of least resistance to penetrate the market, right? What is the role that you're ideally placed to thrive at?
Okay.
Another factor that comes to mind is that often as immigrants, when we face a lot of rejection, right? When we're applying for a lot of roles and we're facing a lot of rejection, what we tend to do is subconsciously lower our own value.
True.
And even apply for roles that we're overqualified for, thinking there's a higher chance of us getting that, right? Unfortunately, my experience has shown me that we actually are best placed when we're approaching roles that have a direct relevance to what we've done previously, and approaching them from a position of strength rather than a position of weakness. What I mean by that is, if I were to approach an interview or an HR or a recruiter saying, I've seen the job description for this role,
Yes.
and I fit all of those criteria, and I have the same relevant work experience, and I'm confident I'll be able to add value to that company. That sounds very different to saying, hi, I would like to apply for this role. I really need a job.
Yes.
So what I would do with someone who's approaching me from that is, first of all, help them gain clarity about what it is that they want to do and that they are best placed to do. And then I would work with them at the mindset level to shift from a position of weakness to a position of strength. So build up their confidence. And there are 3 principles that I use when I'm working with people, which underpin what Transform to Thrive is all about. The first is, you've got to nourish yourself. What I mean by that is, physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, in whatever ways, you've got to really nourish yourself, find what energizes you, and really make that a priority.
Sure.
The second is, you earn true confidence. Often I find people waver between a slight sense of arrogance or low self-esteem, and both of these are detrimental in your job search journey.
True.
What is ideal is to come to that point where you're really getting your confidence from within yourself. And that only, in my experience, what I've learned is that it comes from taking consistent action towards your goals.
Right.
Removing the metrics that are out of your control, focusing on those that are within your control. Let's say, for example, you tell me as a client, hey, Sudarshan, my next action step is to apply for 10 jobs this week.
Yes.
Right? By the time you get to that 10 jobs, regardless of whether you've received a response or not, you're still going to feel a sense of inner satisfaction from actually achieving that target that you set out for yourself. And doing that consistently, week on week, is what's going to build up your confidence. And that's why you really need someone to like motivate you when you're probably not feeling so motivated, and to maybe give you tips or guidance on what your best way of approaching those applications are. And that's where I come in, to kind of give you that boost in confidence or encouragement when you need it, and even tell you if the actions you're taking are aligned with your goal. And then once people take those actions, it's really taking them through the life cycle of the job search journey, right? So finding clarity on what you want, developing a strategy to help you get your objective, coming up with an action plan and accountability tracker to help you stay consistent, help you solve any hurdles that you come across and give you perspectives and strategies on how to break through them. And once you get an interview, really equipping you with all the strategies and tactics which are going to maximize your chances of success, make you stand out from the competition, and go into that interview feeling absolutely confident and prepared.
Right. One point I would want to add to this is the importance of networking within your field. So like you said, you need to be working on nourishing yourself. You need to be working on your communication skills and your self-esteem. But on top of that, one important thing that a lot of people tend to forget is the importance of networking, especially within a place like Australia, the work culture that is over here. I had to learn this the hard way. And now looking back, it's something that I would tell people. Try to find people within your field and within your within your specialization who are in similar roles such as yourself. And what I've generally found is the difference between the work culture in Australia versus back home in Pakistan is that people are much more open to share their knowledge and experiences with you if only you approach them in the right way.
Absolutely.
People are really friendly, people are really open, and people are genuinely helpful in this country. What I felt is so. On top of working on yourself, if you can also work on networking, attend maybe some meetups of people within that field of work. Try to find out the buzz that is going on in the industry at that point. What are the latest trends? What are the latest skills or experiences? Or in my case as an engineer, what are the latest certifications that might help you land a specific kind of role that you're targeting? I think networking goes a long way.
It absolutely does. It's a critical part of the job search strategy. Because your chance, like first of all, 80% of roles aren't advertised. Only 20% are advertised, right?
True.
So it really is about who you know and who knows you. Especially in Australia, it's a highly referral-based market. Yes. And as an immigrant coming in, you are inherently at a disadvantage because you don't have the social capital to carry you through job search transitions.
Yes.
So it's very important to like build up that network and not just treat it as a means to an end where you're just hoping someone refers you for a job, but genuinely cultivate a relationship with people and see how you can add value to them and be really curious about their journey. Because when you approach things from that point of view, people are more than willing to help.
And it's also more enjoyable for yourself as well. If you're approaching it from a place of genuinely learning, wanting to understand what the other person's experiences are and what they've been through, and how you can follow in their footsteps and do what they did. People coming from immigrant backgrounds in a lot of countries, like in overpopulated countries or scarcity of resources, where there's a scarcity of resources in countries, people tend to associate a negative taboo against referrals.
Right.
There is a negative taboo that, he got the job because he has his XYZ connection in a certain company. He didn't really deserve it. He just got the job because of that. We need to disassociate ourselves from that way of thinking, I believe. That may have been true 30, 40 years ago at some point, but in this day and age, it's not. Yeah. You because what you've done is you have formalized that referral system. You've taken the best aspects out of it. That is, a person who is working within the company, he's vouching for somebody who's applying for the job. So that's a genuine that's a genuine up that you get through that referral. But you will only ever get that job if you manage to smash the interview and you are actually deserving of the job.
That's right. That's absolutely right. I guess it's about trust at some level.
Yes.
Because companies, they've already hired someone and that person is a part of the company, right?
They know the culture.
Part of the culture, they know the company, they know who in their network might be well placed to thrive and add value to the company.
Sure.
So from the company's point of view, a referral is highly valued because it means the person who your employee is referring is more likely to add value to the organization than somebody else. It's basically being vouched for.
You're being vouched for.
and you really need someone to vouch for you and advocate for you to thrive in this market.
Yeah. In my own experience, what I found was it really helps to connect with people from your own country or from your own background who are occupying roles within the kind of companies that you're looking to target. If you have a connection, for example, I had a few connections of people who were alums of the same university that I went to back in Pakistan, right? So that really helps. If nothing else, not even for a referral, but just to understand how the industry works. Because hiring trends or the way that hiring processes work in Australia is not necessarily the same as your home country.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I would call a warm lead, Hussain.
Yeah.
Because they're more likely to help you.
Yes.
Why is that? Because they have probably undergone similar experiences when they were starting out.
True.
And someone might have helped them then. And this is that you giving them an opportunity to give back as well.
Yeah, sure.
So people are more likely to help when they see a shared background or a shared connection. That said, it's completely okay to reach out to people who might have a different background as well.
Yes.
You never know. People, you really got to appeal to their sense of wanting to give back.
Yes.
And approach from a place where you want to give back to them as well.
Yeah. Yeah. With the kind of coaching that you provide to people, I guess the most value that anybody listening to the podcast at the moment would get is there are a lot of students out there who are now coming on direct graduate visas. If you know that over the past 6 or 7 years, the need for coming into a master's program and then applying to jobs, that trend has kind of gone away now. There are still people who are coming in as students, but there are also like graduate visas of people coming in directly ready for the job market, right?
That's right.
So in that case, you come over here and you do not have that lead up of 2 years while your degree is going on to build that network and, to build that social capital.
Yeah.
What would your advice be to somebody like that who's just jumping right into the middle of the job market?
Yeah.
And also as a side question, what is the job market currently like post-COVID? Like, are things opening back up? How are the trends going?
Yeah, I'll answer the second question first. So currently the market is such that employers are still facing a severe skills shortage. I guess 8 out of 10 employers still feel like there is a massive skills crunch.
Okay.
Unemployment is at an all-time low, pretty much. But at the same time, at this point in August 23, but at the same time, employers still feel a need for skilled employees. So sponsorships are still on the table. They still, and what COVID has really done is it's opened up this mental block to hiring candidates from overseas directly.
Yes.
In that sense, it's been really good for the market. So people who are highly skilled in different countries and different industries do actually have higher chances of getting a role here. But that's also starting to change a little bit now because borders have been open for some time. So I guess from a market insight perspective, a lot of employers are still looking to hire candidates and are open to sponsoring them. Given the increase in inflation and interest rates, they're also open to providing raises at this point of time. And most employees, in fact, about 85% of employees right now, do plan to ask for a raise in the upcoming review cycle.
Once the camera's off, I'm going to ask you how I'm supposed to ask for a raise at my job.
Happy to help. I think it's important to delve into negotiation as a technique. Yeah.
On that point, one other unnecessary taboo that people from our background need to realize is that negotiation is your right as an employee, and it should never be off the table, even when you're starting out.
I really want to speak to this because I guess there's this somewhat ingrained belief that when someone gives you a job, that they're doing you a favor.
And you're supposed to just grab whatever opportunity comes to be grateful for it. Exactly.
Yeah. It's like at every point someone has handed out something to you, like a job or a promotion, and you're just gratefully receiving that. And it's great to be grateful about it. At the same time, it's also important to recognize that you are adding value to them as well.
True.
And negotiation is in fact one of the highest ROI skills that you can pick up, because if you pick that up really well, it has multiple benefits. You can actually build a stronger relationship with your people leader or your organization. It shows that you have the confidence and you know your own worth to ask for what you are worth and what you deserve.
And people respect that here.
People respect that. That's actually how you build a stronger rapport with your organization, by negotiating well.
That's also at every point. Sorry to cut you off. That's also the mindset that has been ingrained into us from the background, right? That even employers in that background feel this sense of entitlement that, oh, if we're offering a job to such and such candidate, we're doing them a favor.
Yeah.
Whereas it's not, it really isn't. In this day and age, we need to let go of all of these hang-ups and, actually realize that you as an individual have worth and you have value that you are adding to any organization that you go to. Given the condition that you are good at what you do.
Absolutely. That's a very important condition and a prerequisite. You've got to be a high performer.
Exactly. If you are good at what you do, you set your own price.
That's exactly
in
right.
the market.
I think it comes back to that problem-solving mindset. One actionable insight I can probably give people who are looking to shift their mindset around negotiation is focus less on yourself and focus more on the problem that you are solving for the company and the impact that it has. Sure. You can divide the impact into tangible impact, higher revenue, lower costs, increased retention, all of those metrics, or even the intangibles. Perhaps you're a person who brings the team together. Perhaps you're someone who people love to engage with and you bring a sense of a can-do attitude to the team. All of these are valuable to your employer. And recognizing what you bring to the table can really give you an edge when you're approaching that negotiation table. Let me give you an example actually, Hussain. So I was working with a client and she was in a pretty toxic work culture.
Yes.
And she really wanted to leave. And being in that toxic environment for quite some time really had lowered her own confidence and self-esteem.
Sure.
When she started working with me, she knew which roles she was applying for or she wanted to. And we set a really ambitious goal, and she said, in 1 month from now, I want to get 3 job offers paying me X amount, which by the way represented a 70% raise on what she was currently making.
Wow.
And it came with a promotion as well. And I want this by this date. Right? And we went at it with all the positive energy that we could muster. She really put in the work. Right? She put herself out there, conducted informational interviews, reached out to a lot of people. There were a lot of tiny mindset shifts that we needed to make. For example, one of them was, she said, you know what, I reach out to so many people, but no one responds to me. I feel like people are unhelpful. That was a very important one to kind of cut right there. So I said, look, people are busy. They want to help you if you approach them in the right way. So you got to target and calibrate your approach and accept the fact that people are busy. So maybe you reach out to 100 people, 40 of them might respond to you. Out of the 40 that respond to you, 20 of them might actually have a call with you. Out of the 20 that have a call with you, 10 might actually refer you. 5 might lead to an interview. 1 might lead to an offer.
Exactly.
Right? So at the get-go, adjusting your own expectations allows you to approach from a position of greater strength. After that, she actually ended up doing really well in a few interviews, had multiple interviews lined up, did really well, got her first offer, accepted it. That already came with a 70% raise, right? And she negotiated upwards with that. At the point, she didn't have the confidence to do it. But I said, look, they loved you. They absolutely loved what they saw in the interview. So maybe you can actually negotiate a 10K increase. So she went into it with a really strong negotiation technique and approach and ended up getting that 10K increase.
Wow.
And then she got another offer which matched that. So she, in fact, took that second role because it was aligned with her industry interests and long-term career perspective as well. And then she got a third offer from her dream company. And they were literally begging to have her. They said, look, you're making a big mistake by not saying yes to us. And she came back and told me, you know what, Sudarshan, it feels really flattering to be pursued by my dream company. But I'm very happy with this role right now. I'm going to stick with it.
Yes. Right. That's really important, understanding what you want. And in terms of you saying, understanding the long-term perspective of how your career is going to go, this is another point that I wanted to touch on is, I said this to a friend of mine recently, that we should always view our careers as marathons rather than sprints. A sprint, you just go at it with 100% effort and you have that finish line in mind. With your career, it doesn't work like that, because if you are a working professional, you're looking to work in your industry or in a relevant industry for the next 30, 40 years of your life. And you need to approach it the same way. You can't afford to go gung-ho at every single thing and burn yourself out.
That's right.
Right. So you need to really look at, okay, what is my trajectory? Where do I want to end up? And you also need to realize that with career, things take time. Your career progression, your promotion, your wealth creation, your network, everything takes time. In a day and age where social media and TikTok has reduced our attention spans to 60 seconds, careers cannot be summed up in 60 seconds. Nothing, the instant gratification that we have all become accustomed to, careers don't work that way. You really need to to toil and make your way through to a point where you gain that satisfaction out of your career, and you need to pay your dues as you go along. So that kind of expectation management I think is also really important.
I completely agree. I think it's a mindset shift to viewing it as a long-term endeavor,
Yes.
rather than a short-term burst. And that it comes back to your principles of investing as well, right? You look at things from a long term. You're going to make better decisions along the way,
Yep.
and you're going to approach it more strategically as well. And you're less likely to get shook by the inevitable storms that life throws at you in your career, in other areas as well, right? So
Yep.
if you have a plan and a long-term objective, you're going to be approaching it strategically and maneuvering accordingly as well.
And I also believe it's very important for, these terms get thrown around a lot, that I love my job, I love going to work and all that. But for some people, it is actually true. And it's not by chance. People have made it so by themselves, by pursuing a job that they actually enjoy working at, and it's fulfilling for them, not just in a monetary way, but also in a personal capacity, that they align with the values of the work, they align with the team that they're working with the people that they're dealing with the culture of the place that they're working at,
And the purpose of the organization.
and the purpose of the organization. And that really these are the factors that really help you stay long term. The money is good. Nobody says no to more money, right? But the gratification that you get out of a salary increase will only last you about a couple of months. After that, it's business as usual. So what you really need to understand is that, like you said with PwC, you're happier at Westpac because you have a better work-life balance, right? So you feel more fulfilled over there. Whereas if you are constantly in a crunch environment like PwC, I mean, that is for some people. It's not for everyone. In the same way, in every different industry, there are roles that are suited for different kind of people. So you need to really understand what your fit is, what your values are, what you want to get out of your career. The same way you try to understand what you want out of your life, in your relationships, in your friendships. So in the same way, this whole generation of new people who are graduating and joining up in the workforce, they really need to take the time to have these conversations with themselves, particularly people from our generation who are in their late 20s, early 30s, I believe, coming from immigrant backgrounds, because we were never really taught to have these conversations with ourselves. We were always asked to be, like you said, to be grateful for any opportunity that comes our way and just grab it at the first opportunity. But no, you need to take the time to understand what you actually want and what will satisfy you.
Absolutely. I think you hit upon like two really important things there. Aligning yourself with the values and the purpose of an organization. That is going to be the biggest contributor towards long-term fulfillment. At Transform to Thrive, the purpose is to help migrants build a fulfilling career in Australia. That sense of fulfillment doesn't come about by accident.
It doesn't.
It comes from an incredible sense of clarity and conviction about what it is that you want, why you want it, and then aligning that with something that's looking for someone like you. And that's where you can really thrive. That's where you're best positioned to be a top performer and therefore successfully negotiate as well along the way. Let me just give you an actionable insight into how you can apply that in your, let's say, your interview, right? The question that people ask the first thing in the interview, they say, tell me about yourself, right? As someone from a Southeast Asian background, what I've noticed a lot of people doing is they would start talking about their previous experiences, primarily. What I might suggest as an alternative is probably start talking about your values.
Yes.
And talk about how those values align with the organization's values and the purpose of that organization. At a high level, when they say, tell me about yourself, what they're really asking for is tell me about how you as a person are going to be an asset for us, how you're going to solve our problems. And if you make that rapport, if you build that rapport at the high level, at the level of values, you've already got an in. Then all your experiences, skills, qualifications will come into play.
Yep.
So aligning your values with that of the organization it's really important.
And what I've also found is that with most companies these days, every company has their own internal methodologies and SOPs on how they conduct the work. So they want somebody who's easy to work with and who's smart enough to understand and keep up with the work, who's a high performer, like you said. But everything else you can learn on the job. It doesn't really matter to them as such that, okay, have you been trained in exactly the way that they want you to do the work? You can teach that at any rate. You can learn that as you go on the job, but aligning yourself with the company it's what they're looking for. That is this person somebody who can stick around with us for medium to long term, and somebody who can be a member of the team who is actually contributing to the culture of the company. On that point, I also want to mention that when you go for an interview, always remember the interview is a two-way process. It is not just you who is giving the interview to the company for employment. It's also you who is taking the company's interview to understand that is this company for me or not.
That's right.
You might go to an interview for 5 companies, but you might only get the right vibe from 2 of them. And those are the ones that you should actually be targeting. And this is something that a lot of people really undermine. And I completely understand that money is a huge factor. You might be offered huge amounts of money for a role that you would be absolutely miserable in. As you would know in PwC, right?
I wouldn't put it that strongly, but
Okay.
but yes, I know what you mean. Yeah, I guess I love that bit you said about the interview being a two-way process, because, and this again comes into how you approach interviews. It's very important to be curious about the interviewer as well, to find out, to build that rapport with them. Because let me tell you what an interviewer is thinking as they're interviewing you. They're thinking, can I put this person in front of my stakeholders that I have to deal with?
Yes.
Will they be able to build a rapport with them?
Yes.
Right? So if you're able to build a rapport and demonstrate that in the interview with the interviewer, they're more confident that you can do the same thing with the other people in the organization. So again, focusing less about yourself and more about building that rapport and relationship with the interviewer can really go a much longer way than you think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And one other bit that I practice in the interviews that I have to give is that normally towards the end of the interview, people ask you that, do you have any questions for us?
Yeah.
Use that as an opportunity. Use that as an opportunity to actually ask a question that actually makes the interviewer think. Ask them, if you can ask them if you can ask the interviewer a question that actually shows your eagerness to understand the organization or to understand the role in a better way, rather than asking very, very trivial questions like, when is the start date? What are the salary expectations or anything like that? Any of those trivial questions. If you go beyond that and ask some deeper questions, that really adds to building that rapport with the company.
Absolutely. It really helps to do your homework.
Yes.
And go very well researched into any interview.
Yeah.
And if you can show that you've done that in the first 30 seconds, you're already classified as a high value candidate. Here's one really amazing question you can ask interviewers. If you're going to be reporting directly to them, ask them what their management style is like. Alternatively, you can also ask them, what are the success metrics for this role in 3 to 6 months?
Yes.
For a successful candidate to be regarded as a really high performer, what traits or skills would they have to demonstrate in this role? That can also give you a lot of insight into how to approach that role. And it also tells the interviewer you're already starting to think about how to do well in this role.
That you're already envisioning yourself as part of the organization.
Exactly.
Okay. Now, the ultimate question that anybody who's watching this podcast, they're going to go down in the comments and say that all of this is fine that you guys are talking about. How do I get through the first barrier that I can't speak well in English? How do I have all of these values. I know the kind of roles that I want. I know what I'm worth and I'm highly skilled. I cannot give a confident interview in English. How would you suggest a candidate tackles that? Because that is, if not the biggest factor, I believe, in the make or break of the interview.
Yeah. I mean, it really influences how confident you feel, right?
Yep.
And I think more than the language barrier, it's the impact that it has on the confidence of an individual, which really shows up in an interview. So my recommendation for someone who's probably struggling with a language barrier, unfortunately, there's no easy way out.
Yes.
The only thing that's actually going to help is you putting yourself out there more often and building up that sense of confidence. So find any opportunity that you have to speak in public in English. Right? Even if you fall flat on your face, that's still okay because you're building your confidence.
Yeah.
So I conduct these group workshops, right, for interview preparation. And I encourage people to I put them on the spot.
Yeah.
I tell them, okay, so let's say you're in an interview. I'm going to ask you a behavioral question. Tell me about a time when you had to deal with a tough stakeholder.
Yeah.
I give them a framework to answer the question, give them some time to think about it. And then I really encourage them to speak. Because what that does is you're speaking in front of maybe 5 other people who are in the same boat. And just overcoming that initial fear, that anxiety of, oh my god, I'm going to speak and it's not going to come out right. Doing that in small doses, right, builds up that confidence to do it in an interview. So take every opportunity you have to speak, and the other recommendation would be to read as much as you can.
Yes, correct. I used to give tutoring classes for PTE
Right.
while I was studying.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, because I managed to do really well in the PTE, so I used to give classes for that. One of the things that a lot of people ask me, how do we get better at conversational English? And I said, look, like any other language, the only way to get better at it is to use it.
Yeah.
It's a tool. Language is a tool. The more you use it, the more proficient you're going to get at it. So in terms of English, the good thing about learning English is that it's the most common language out there. You have all your media, your movies, your writing, your books, everything, your music, everything is predominantly in English these days. So just open yourself up to that kind of media. Watch a good documentary, watch a good series, read a book like you said. Those things, or listen to a podcast. Listen to In the Gap. so
Nice plug.
if you consume more English media, you're eventually going to get better at it.
That's
I think that's the only way. And unfortunately, like you said, language is something. It takes time. There are no shortcuts to getting better at a language.
The only way to capitalize that process is putting yourself out there more often.
Yes, for sure. Right. So one final question that I always ask people who come on the podcast is, based on all of your experience, you're so well traveled. You work with people with such diverse backgrounds. You've studied in such diverse fields, and you've been in so many different parts of the world throughout your experience. Based on all of that, Sudarshan, if I ask you, what is the one nugget of truth, or the one lesson in life that life has taught you, that you would give away to the viewers?
Yeah, that's a great question, Sam. I guess this is inspired by Viktor Frankl's book, The Meaning of Life, and it's something that I found really helpful for me in like a really difficult moments. It's this understanding that the only thing that is really in your control is how you choose to see a situation, and your own thoughts and feelings. Beyond this, everything else is out of your control. But you have this little space where life can throw whatever it does at you, where you still have a choice in how you want to respond. And just taking that second, pause and ask yourself, how do I want to respond to this? Right? It can allow you to access more resilience, more wisdom from within yourself, and more energy to help you achieve what you actually want.
Perfect. Amazing. This has been a very insightful conversation, Sudarshan. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm sure a lot of people would derive a huge amount of value out of what you've told us.
I've loved being a part of this system, and really looking forward to how In the Gap grows. And if anyone wants to reach out to me, please feel free to message me on LinkedIn.
Yep.
I'm happy to help.
Yeah, for sure. I'll be plugging in Sudarshan's LinkedIn information and his contact details within the description for this video. If anybody wants to reach out to Sudarshan or myself with any other kind of queries, please do. Also, follow In the Gap on all of our social media platforms. All of our short form content is there. It's really shareable. So if you enjoy conversations like these, hit that subscribe button, share it with your family and friends, or other people who you might think might derive value from this. Until next time, this has been Sam. You've been watching In the Gap. I'll see you on the next one.